Hi everyone, welcome to LiTup 365 Summer Session 3. This month we're talking about relativity and we are finishing up with it on this session, and then next session we're going to go ahead and move into attraction. As I said at the beginning of the last session, and I'll probably repeat this all the way through these 2 months because they are so interlinked for me. So attraction, again, are our rules, what we experience as reality. And relativity is the narrative we write around those rules and what we think we experience. So this week I want to talk about that, about how that narrative works and the importance of having a narrative, having this story, this connection, because the human brain doesn't store data like a computer. So the way the hippocampus works when it's storing memory is it's not just storing individual memories that then can later be written into code. What it's actually doing is making connections. So all of our memory is stored by connections. So when you're trying to improve memory, that's why things like connecting it to something helps us remember, because it's about this new information coming in and connecting to what's already there. So the importance of the narrative is that it's kind of the pool where we swim. So when we're talking about these two states of consciousness, one of the things we try to do is try to control the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind holds all those rules. It's throwing information into the conscious mind. And what we end up doing is thinking that we can use the conscious mind to control the subconscious, and we really can't. We won't even perceive the things that aren't something that the brain can be relative to will change it. This is a really big thing in paranormal research and people seeing apparitions and stuff. There's a thing that our brain does called matrixing. So if it sees something it doesn't understand, it will convert it into something it can understand. So that's why you might look in wood grain or at a window and see a face, because the brain makes it into a face. And it's kind of like once it does, you can't unmake it in the sense. And so the brain is using that information, that narrative, to interpret the world. And that's what we experience as reality. Again, if it doesn't make sense, the brain will resolve it. But it will pick a resolution that is familiar first. And that is why it's so difficult to progress forward. Why people struggle so much with being able to break patterns is because the brain is lazy in a sense. It's always trying to conserve energy. And so what it's going to do is it's going to go to the most familiar, which is our habitual behavior. And so we want to talk about how we can break out of that. How do we create a new narrative? And because once we can create a new narrative, the brain does work both ways, and that narrative the subconscious mind will adapt to the new narrative. So we talk about how the brain's adaptive. So for example, if you need to go to a new city, your brain will struggle at first trying to get to know and familiarize with the city. But eventually that subconscious mind will adapt to the narrative of that new location. And so you can travel the streets easier. Therefore, the best thing we can do is change the narrative in the conscious mind and then let the subconscious mind adapt and then write a more advanced narrative. If we keep working on our narrative, then the subconscious mind becomes more and more adept at playing out that narrative. So the subconscious mind is what's adept, it's the part of the brain that does things really well, but it will adapt. That part of the brain will adapt to the new narrative. So how do we create that new narrative? That's what I want to talk about this week. Last week we talked about the closed mind, and this week is really about the open mind. It's about being able to utilize information in a way that is accessible, that the brain isn't just blocking it out. So one of the things I want to talk about first is the fact that we need to first, part of the open mind is we need to be willing to let go of what already exists. And I'm not just talking about bad. Now, so many things I see that are releasing. We're releasing what no longer serves us. We're releasing negativity. But one of our biggest hangups can be the positive things in our life, that we're not releasing these things that have meant something. And then we're expecting some result from them that is not relative anymore, that is never going to give us what we want. So one of the things I like to do to look at it is to realize that how we see the world is how we see ourselves. So the way this works is our definition of the world defines who we are in it. So we're not just an individual, we're a social species. So when you create a definition around the world, right? So you say the world is a certain thing, and we all have unique world definitions. So one of the problems is that we go out and try and get everyone to agree with our definition of the world so that we can validate who we are in it. Where the truth is, changing our perspective of the world can change who we are in it and give us more freedom. So it's not about getting other people to look at the world the way we look at it. What it is, okay, I have this global perspective. This is the way I see the world. Now, because of that perspective, I am going to define myself and who I am in that world. The only thing I can do is define myself as something I see as relative to the world. I can't define myself any other way. That would be impossible. So we want to be able to change the perspective of the world, or at least the narrative of who we are in it. We need to change one or the other. So we basically need to change our world. Now, a lot of times people talk to me about, well, I'm not having problems or my life's good. Here's the thing. If you're not 100% happy, like happy, peaceful, all of those things, 100% of the time, then there is opportunity to improve. We tend to believe that we shouldn't be happy all the time. And we may not be the exact emotion of happy, but we should be in a positive sensory state. We are actually set up as humans that we have very little threat against us. Overall, we're safer than we've ever been as a species. We have resources that we can access. There are plenty of humans, so our species isn't at risk of extinction. We have basically everything we need right at our hands to an extent. So there's really no reason to be in a negative state, but we tend to start to think it's inherent and that we should just expect bad days, or we should expect to react a certain way. If there's a breakup or a loss in our lives, that we should be sad, or that if someone cuts us off in traffic, that we should be angry. But none of those are definitive. And they're actually signs that we're not using the brain at its best capabilities. So I have a little story to explain this and how the subconscious mind is running things and we may not realize, but how we can start to realize and start to recognize. So some of the things we're going to be doing this week in the exercises are going to be about observation of ourselves. And we're going to kind of approach it two ways. So we're going to follow through on what we talked about last week. Then we're also going to look at the possibilities of who we could be. And so I had this interesting experience recently. I was really feeling drained. I was like low energy. Some of my thoughts were kind of a depressive thought. And now I'm a person who observes myself constantly. So I didn't just accept that. I said, why? What's happening chemically that I'm feeling this? And so I knew as a person that the energy dips often started in the afternoon around 3, and I had eliminated that. But there was something within the last month or two that I was like, why is my energy dipping? So I'll talk a little in our next session about why that happened and part of what I was discovering. But right now I want to talk about the action of what I do, because the discovery, the underlying story is not important. I'm going to talk about it next week because it connects to something else, but it's not important, the why. It's more, okay, what does work? The best thing we can do, first and foremost, is not say, why isn't this working? But to say, what will work? Right? That's a whole different perspective of reality. If I just ignore trying to analyze why things don't work, which is primal, and just start acting from what will work, then that's purely human innovation. And that's like the ultimate root of everything that I'm talking about. But for me, I kept hearing people, you're doing too much. People have talked about burnout, which is not a real thing. Burnout is actually a myth. The brain loves to be stimulated. So I thought that I was doing too much getting ready for this. My schedule's about to experience a major shift, and I thought maybe I was doing too much. But I knew that was a social rule, and I've never believed in it. I've never consciously believed in that rule. So I kind of kept watching myself. And I realized the problem was actually the breaks I was taking, which I knew in the past. There was a point in time when someone said, you need to just take a full day off. You don't take enough days off, take a full day off. And so I thought, okay, maybe I'm wrong. I'm arguing with everyone. Everyone's telling me to do it. Maybe I should go ahead and try it, even though it feels wrong. And I spent a full day just watching Netflix because I didn't really have anywhere to go or anything. I was just about lounging the entire day. The next day I had a migraine. And I realized I tried it a couple more times, and every time I did that, I ended up with a headache. And every time, even if I'd go take a break, go for a hike or something, I'd feel more physical fatigue. And so I knew that that didn't work. But what I realized this time was it was the way I was taking the breaks and what the breaks were doing. And this is the really important thing. So there are two ways I take breaks. When I'm ready to shut my brain off and not be thinking anymore, so not be in that prefrontal cortex so much. Two things I do. I either play games on my phone, and there's a specific games I play. They some challenge, some are paint by numbers, others are puzzles and logic games, so some make me think harder. And I feel into whichever one is right. I either do that or I watch something on TV, because watching other people's stories is a break for my brain. But what I started to notice is as I was watching, so there's a show that's back on TV that I loved. It was gone for a while, and I didn't have access to it, and then it went off the air for a bit, and then it came back, and it showed up on Hulu, because I don't have TV or cable or anything. It showed up on Hulu, and I was over the moon. So I said, okay, I'm going to watch this during my breaks. And so what I'll do is that'll be a thing kind of I do at the end of the night too. When I'm done working, is I'll just watch a couple episodes of something and go to sleep. I was finding I was wanting to watch more than one episode when I watch, and I was saying, okay, what is this? Because this is the problem. The problem is if I don't get enough done, it's because I extend my break. I take too long of a break, which is the opposite of what the social rule is. And I started to realize something as I started to observe it. And that's the part I want you to really connect to, is the fact that I was pausing and observing myself and how I was reacting. And what I noticed is that I wasn't feeling satiated by the game or the show. I would watch an episode and something in my brain would say, oh, not enough, I need more. And I think about that a lot with food that's addictive, with television shows, with the games. It's like, oh, just one more, one more. And I realized the reason why my brain is saying one more is it wants to be satiated. It didn't get what it needed from the game, which makes sense, because doing games and TV and stuff would be what would be equivalent to phase one. It's just a relief of suffering. It doesn't satiate the brain. So to just turn off a fight or flight response is not enough. We need to actually activate the more advanced brain. And I realized that addiction is a lack of being satiated, and that rest and digest is not enough for the brain. I started to notice something on the other side of that, which was that when I started taking classes again, when I started to go to school again, I noticed that after the class I would have more energy. And at first I thought it was the class, the thinking hard. Phase two is the thinking hard. And that is good. Like if you're a person that doesn't activate the prefrontal cortex enough, you need to train that prefrontal cortex to be able to move on to the next phase. But I was noticing that I would have energy, and what I realized is that what motivated me was the epiphany. It wasn't even taking a new class, because I realized recently, and I've talked about this, I'm an information hoarder. I have I have old computers, I have disks, I have all this information that my brain doesn't want to let go of, because all this information is vital. There are all the pieces of information that I gathered over the years is what's making what I teach now possible. I am putting together information that I'm watching the most advanced psychology classes, and they say, oh, humans can't do this, humans can't do that. And I'm like, I'm doing that with people every day. And the reason why I can is because I do hoard information. But I realized what wasn't feeding me is just getting the new information. It was putting pieces of information together, then triggered an epiphany, and that epiphanal state was what stimulated the brain. And I think this is true for all people. Now, not everybody's going to work in the same way. Not everybody wants to study physics and neuroscience and psychology and pharmacology and education, all the things I've studied to put together what I put. That's not what it's about. It's about realizing that repeating information is devastating for humans. Now, this is really important because we worry about repeat to get into memory. Now, the thing is, we're forcing the brain to remember what's important because of social conditioning, because of social survival. So there's this thing about remembering names. And if you don't remember someone's name, it's like the biggest offense in the world. That's a rule. And for me, I forget names, but my brain stores the data of brain information because that's what's important to it. Knowing a person's name is not near as important as knowing how memory is stored through the hippocampus and what the hippocampus is doing. Now, if I don't remember a person's name, I'll just ask them. And there are people I've known for years. I mean, I have a friend that I've known for over 30 years. And there was one time I was introducing her to someone, and at that moment, I forgot her name, which is weird because I don't forget her name, but it was just a moment where that piece of information was not available. I'll just turn to a person and go, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. I'm not doing it to be offensive, and I'll tell people that. But if a person is offended, that I can't own all that. What I need to realize is this. I want the healthiest brain possible. And repeating information is detrimental to the brain for this reason. Even if it's good information, the danger of repeating it is damaging because so many rules come with it that we may not be thinking of. So we have all these rules for how the brain is supposed to work instead of taking advantage of the way our brain naturally works. And then we create dysfunction for ourselves by trying to force it to do something. This session is really about being able to be in that state of observation, being able to observe yourself. And so because the minute we can observe something new, all of the rules change. That's what an epiphany is a moment where all our rules change because we've discovered something new. But the only safe place for the brain to be the healthiest place is to be continually gleaning in new information and letting the brain decide what it will keep and what it won't. Because it'll keep what it needs for that time. The subconscious mind is highly efficient. The thing is, it's not highly efficient at the thing we're trying to make it do. It's highly efficient at the thing it does that's beyond our comprehension, that we can't comprehend its ability to do. So the best thing we can do is to glean new information. Now, we can't do that without building the brain function to do it. So we do need to have practices. So we can't expect to be in that state that I'm talking about all the time if our brain isn't adept at that yet. But we can train our brain to be adept at that, which does raise our IQ. It also makes us happier and healthier. So this time is really about digging into the work by not just examining ourselves anymore, but examining our narrative, our story in the world. So who am I in the world? Because that narrative makes my rules. And again, I'll get into a narrative explanation of that, an example, when we start talking attraction. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to shift our focus. Because if we can focus on something new, the old will naturally fall away. To actually work on stuff that already exists in our brain is just reinforcing it. To get something new means the brain will like, oh, I'm going to eat up that new information, and then something old falls away, right? So the work is in the focus. A good thing to think about is that we try to think that the brain has a limited capacity. It can only remember so much. That's not true. Our ability to access it comes in the health of our brain. But it was interesting, in one of the neuroscience classes, he was talking about the man that they made the movie Rain Man from. he memorized phone book after phone book. There's not like some limited amount of information that he could take in, and it was all accessible. He had perfect recall, so he could recall anything that he'd ever remembered. And so it's not like, don't think of it as limited information. What we want to do instead is think about, oh, I want to build up the ability of my brain to recall it. Because if I can do that, and if I can make healthy connections, and if I can be able to take in new information, then I can build that adaptability that moves me out of safety and familiarity, the stuff that's really damaging my life. So what we want to do is train our brain to be able to focus on possibility instead of historical data. And it's pretty easy to do. So we'll be doing that. We are going to have a few exercises that are going to be about self-reflection and reflection of the world, but we're also going to carry over the exercise from last week and dig into that. And then we're going to dig into some new possibilities for ideas we're going to have of ourselves as we move into fall, because this is where we're going to really dig into awakening something in ourselves that is far beyond anything we could comprehend before. So that'll be it for this week. I'm really excited. I'm excited. I love this time of year as we start to move into fall and start to realize all that hard work, all the patience we had in winter, and the confusion of spring, seeing the sparks of ideas, but having to wait to see to really see where the work is. And now we still have 2 more months of work. Someone said to me the other day, we're halfway through summer, and we're not. We are, as of today, 1 month into summer. So we're 1/3 into summer. So we have 2 more months of work to do. So in that, we're going to be digging into a lot. So we're going to get all set up for that so that as we move into attraction, we can move into some really deep clarity about that. So that'll be it for this week, for this session. And I look forward to seeing you at the next. And I really do hope you enjoy this journey. This is a chance to really see things and have lots of epiphanies as we move through the last couple months of summer. So that'll be it. And I will look forward to seeing you again soon.